Thanks for tuning in to Howe's Things, a podcast from the David A. Howe Public Library. I'm your host, Nick Gunning. Today's interview might actually be a record holder for the longest period of time between when we initially started chatting about doing the interview and the date we actually recorded it. But I gotta tell you, it was worth the wait because we had a good chat. My guest today is author Jason Fry. Jason spent over a decade as a journalist with the Wall Street Journal before turning his hand to fiction, and he since moved on to writing in the worlds of Star Wars, Minecraft, and his own original creations like the Jupiter Pirates. We cover all that and more in this interview recorded back in November, so give it a listen. Jason, thanks for joining us here at the David A. Howe Public Library this week.
Thanks for having me. This is a treat.
Yeah, good. Well, I wanted to start a little bit with some of your Star Wars work because it's extensive and it covers a lot of ground as far as ages and what kind of work that you do. But I want to talk about one that's more recent. I've had this book club with my friends for a couple of years now where we alternate between Star Trek and Star Wars. And right now we just happen to be reading, and it wasn't even my pick, Star Wars: The Clone Wars, Stories of Light and Dark. And that anthology kicks off with your Yoda story. So can you tell us a little bit about that, your involvement in it?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It was a bucket list thing for me, honestly, because while I have a lot of Star Wars credits, I had never really had a chance to write Yoda outside of a little bit in The Last Jedi novelization. So that was really exciting. And it's not, my story sharing the same face in that book is pretty much a straight adaptation of a wonderful Clone Wars episode, Ambush. So, it wasn't like I was making up my own dialogue or anything like that. But what I really loved about it was a chance to go inside Yoda's head and let us see his thoughts, his attitudes toward the clones, and just his attitudes toward himself. This is someone with the kind of long life we can't possibly imagine.
Sure.
And, what is experiencing the Force like for him?
Mm-hmm.
And that was just so much fun to explore. And I was really grateful for the chance.
Well, it struck me as kind of unique Yoda story in that, just like you said, I mean, you really are seeing behind the curtain. It's a much smaller and more personal view, I think, of Yoda than we typically get in stories. So, I mean, that must have been interesting to explore.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I love to pat myself on the back, though, but I mean, all the credit really should go to Dave Filoni. I mean, that was the first episode of the show after we saw the theatrical movie.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember just being delighted by it. Because exactly as you say, I think you said that well, it is small scale. Yeah. It's just this very intimate thing with Yoda and the clones. And I think it set some of the Clone Wars' most interesting themes in motion in a really wonderful way. Yeah. So, I knew immediately that was the episode I wanted to do for so many reasons.
And why do you think that series, the animated series, why do you think that has struck such a chord with fans? Because it seems like leading up to it, just in my memories, people were kind of skeptical about it. And when they released that theatrical version, I feel like the reviews for that were very mixed, though I always liked it. But why do you think that series has landed so well for people?
I think it was a chance to do something we hadn't seen Star Wars ever do, particularly on screen. And now we live in a golden age of television, but I think as Star Wars fans, we had to get used to that a little bit. Yeah. Again, and speaking on-screen entertainment, we were used to the idea that you got a new story every 3 years. Mm-hmm. And the idea of a much longer story unfolding week by week was new to us. Yeah. And that's what I think Clone Wars does so well, is particularly in engaging with these wonderful characters, with Anakin and Obi-Wan, of course, but also with, Ahsoka, with Maul, with Satine. It was just a different pace and ability to go far, far deeper. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't think that's particularly a surprise for TV. I mean, we've seen things do that really well since The Sopranos, et cetera. Yeah. But it was new for Star Wars.
Definitely.
And and I think you mentioned the movie. I think, the movie didn't serve that goal particularly well because it was just, 4 episodes smashed into a movie and put up there as a discrete thing. That was the old approach. I think those episodes work much better when you see them in the overall arc of the show.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I loved that show so much, and getting to see it come back.
Yeah, that was a surprise.
Was so much fun.
Yeah.
So to play a little role in it, that was a treat.
Definitely. Now, were you a fan of the old, like the Ewoks and Droids animated series from forever ago? I had Droids episodes on a VHS tape, and I wore that VHS tape out.
I didn't get to see them nearly as much because they were hard to find on video, and then it was a long time before kind of the YouTube era started up. But the Droids episodes in particular, I did really like. But, one thing I remind fans of, though, I mean, it makes me sound like old man of the mountain, but here I am, because I kind of am by now. But it's so amazing to think back to that era where when we were really lucky, there was like a book every couple of years, and there was the Marvel comic, and if you subscribed to the right newspaper, there was the newspaper comic, but that was really it. And to have what we have now in terms of books, comics, video games, TV, movies, oh my goodness, I mean, this is the world that my younger self wanted and didn't think would ever exist for Star Wars.
Well, and it kind of is a similar situation with like the dark ages of Star Trek compared to what you have now. So it's nice to see things come back. When did your association with Star Wars begin? Like, what was the first project you worked on?
Oh goodness, way back. I'd been a fan since 1977. I was 8 years old when New Hope came out, which was the absolutely perfect age to be hooked for life.
Oh, definitely.
Oh yeah, and so I was a fan for years and years. But I got back then there was kind of a vetting process with Lucasfilm. I want to say this is like 97, 98.
Okay.
I got vetted actually to write for the Star Wars Adventure Journal by West End Games.
Oh, okay.
Going way back. Yeah. And so I got approved, and my friend Dan Wallace is a really wonderful Star Wars writer with a whole lot of credits to his name. Dan and I were going to write like this in-depth feature on, I don't remember if it was the Corellian sector around Han's homeworld or the Mandalorian sector, or maybe it was both. That's what we were aiming for because we also both love geography. So I got vetted, and then the Adventure Journal closed up, and West End Games filed for bankruptcy. They were actually, believe it or not, basically kind of a shoe company with this offshoot into role-playing games. It was very strange. And I was like, I was heartbroken. I was like, that was my chance, and I missed it. But I'd already been vetted, so I came back and I did some stuff for Wizards of the Coast when they picked up the license. And then my big break was I became the books columnist for the Star Wars Insider.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which turned out to be also a really wonderful apprenticeship because I'd always wanted to write. And every month I would talk to one of the Star Wars novelists about what they did. So it was an amazing opportunity to get to talk shop with some really talented people and get to know all the publishers, etc.
Oh yeah, and what a way to get your foot in the door. I mean, talking to all the people who are doing the jobs that you're interested in.
Yeah, exactly. No, they would actually kind of pay me to go to school. It was a wonderful deal.
Yeah, well, nice work if you can get it.
Yeah, and from there I just took every gig I could get with Star Wars and just gradually, got to do, showed them I was reliable and could keep secrets and got to do more and more things, and I've never stopped, and as long as they let me keep going, I never will.
All right. Now, I said early on that your output for Star Wars is it's vast and it's varied. You're doing full length adult novels, Last Jedi novelization, that sort of thing. You're also doing children's books. You're doing the tie-in stuff like Bomber Command or Rey's Survival Guide. What's that like? I mean, how do those assignments come in? How do you approach them differently? Like, it seems like kind of a unique role you play.
Yeah, I really like. I think the range you talk about would drive some people crazy, but I really like it, and I actually find it energizing. I mean, the life of a freelance writer is you're almost always doing multiple things at once, or else you're probably not going to be able to pay the bills.
Yeah.
But I find if I'm doing two projects that are really different in approach, et cetera, that, the one will sort of recharge the other.
Yeah.
Which is great. And is exactly what you need. Plus, I mean, I love all of it. I mean, training is as a journalist. I was a reporter editor for the Wall Street Journal's online arm for years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, I'm fast, I work on deadline, et cetera. But, because of that, I'm pretty comfortable. I'm comfortable with fiction.
Yeah.
Through my own hobbies. That's obviously a no-no in journalism.
Right.
But, and I'm comfortable with nonfiction and how to approach it, et cetera. But, the common theme is Star Wars. And I just love telling stories and explaining stuff and bringing things to life, whether that's in a fiction setting or in Star Wars, I like to call it kind of nonfiction fiction, exploring the lore.
Those are so popular. I mean, we have a ton. We have a ton of your stuff. We have a ton of any of that sort of like, look at all the vehicles from Star Wars. Look at all these, and they just fly off the shelves. We can't keep them in stock.
Oh yeah, no, I get to write the kind of books I wanted.
Yeah.
So much as a kid, as a teenager, and that's fun to do. Give me a story I can tell, or let me walk people through this amazing universe we all love in some way that's interesting, and I'm incredibly happy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you started in journalism. How happy are you in this moment in time to not be working as a journalist?
I actually did just get to write a wonderful profile of a longtime China scholar. So it was nice to scratch that itch. So I'm not totally out of it.
Okay.
But yeah, it's tough times for journalists, obviously, which is
absolutely
a tragedy because we desperately need a robust press.
I wholeheartedly agree. Yes, you're absolutely right.
But there we are. We're gonna find a model for that to work, but I think there's going to be a lot of pain and a lot of bad things will happen until we do. But for now, I will keep my hand in on that where I see something interesting to do. But yeah, it was not a bad bit of timing going over to the to the fiction world. It's a little healthier.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like it was just the right time. Now, before we move on from Star Wars, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the Last Jedi novelization, because I love a good novelization. I've read many. I feel like novelizations are the thing that got me to be a big reader when I was a kid, because I just wanted more of that thing I liked. Your novelization of The Last Jedi, that must have been an interesting experience, because that, I think I'm pretty confident in saying that The Last Jedi is the most polarizing entry in Star Wars. So what was it like working on that book?
It was great. The first day I really plunged into it was I went out to Skywalker Ranch, where I'd never been, and sat down with Rian Johnson, which was kind of two amazing things in one day.
Yeah,
it was
definitely.
A little dizzying, to be honest.
Sure.
And but Rian was amazing. He actually was a big fan of novelizations, which I would not necessarily have expected in a director, but his reason was that was his way of engaging with a lot of movies that he wasn't allowed to see because when he was too young as a kid. So he really respected the form, and it was important to him, which was a great vote of confidence. And
that is nice. Yeah,
and another great thing is that Rian was, for Last Jedi, not just the director but also the writer.
Yeah.
So it really was his vision from the core. So he sat down with me and we went over parts of the story and the characters' motivations, and even talked about some tricky spots and how the novelization might handle it. And he was unbelievably generous. I really couldn't have asked for more. One of the first things he did, he said, I'm going to make sure you have all the major iterations of the script.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and anything you think would be useful to you, go for it. Which was my first go around as a novelizer, but I'm reasonably confident that that's not what every director would have said.
Yeah.
So he was really generous, and he trusted me with his story, for which I'm very grateful. He also said something which has become one of my commandments for all fiction. We were talking about how The Last Jedi is full of kind of weighty material and big kind of fateful events. And, he said he knew that, but he always wanted to make sure that on screen, you're never more than a couple minutes away from, something lighter, from something light and having that kind of Flash Gordon classic Star Wars feel. And he called that lift, not drag.
Oh.
which I thought was wonderful. And I think it's great, great advice for any kind of fiction like this. So that's become one of my kind of North Stars: lift, not drag. And I use that for all my own stuff too. It's great advice.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask you, too, because this novelization was promoted as an extended edition, and I feel like maybe the others, too, were as well, Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker. When I was speaking to Alan Dean Foster last year, he was saying that he had to keep it pretty tight to the script and didn't have a lot of chance to diverge. But I feel like out of the three, The Last Jedi has a lot of original material not from the movie. Was that yours? Was that something that came from scripts that were cut out? How did that come together?
It was all a mix.
Okay.
Some of it were my ideas, like the opening, which is, I certainly attracted a fair amount of attention when the book came out. That was all my idea.
Yeah.
But again, thought of it as hopefully really tying into the themes of the book. Some of it, particularly where we got to extend dialogue, was from earlier versions of the script.
Okay.
One thing we did that was helpful here, I sat down with the folks in Lucasfilm Disney Publishing, and we made kind of this master Excel sheet of the story that included some stuff that would be in other adaptations, etc. And we did that for a couple reasons. We wanted to make sure that every adaptation had a couple of things that were unique to it, but we also, that was a chance for us to see the full arc of the story and also think about some additional scenes that we wanted, that we thought would work pretty well in a novelization, but might not work somewhere else. So that was kind of a master document that we used.
Okay.
It is interesting, though, like, some of that stuff made it through and got in and got published, and other stuff along the way, we changed our minds and decided that was not the way to go.
Oh, okay.
So, and that's always the way, but it's always interesting for me to look back at. And, fans, of course, because I'm certainly one, are always like, they hear about something we didn't do for TLJ and they're like, oh God, I want that. And I'm always like, well, there are reasons we took that out.
Yeah.
So, but that's always part of the process, and one of the more interesting parts of it to me.
Well, I think just as you were saying with you're adapting the Yoda story for the Clone Wars anthology, was one of the things you get to do in something like a novelization is see an internal monologue that you don't get on the screen. So it allows you to go deeper in a way, and I feel like you definitely achieved that in The Last Jedi. Yeah,
no, that was something I when I sat down with at the beginning to think about this book, that was something that I thought about a lot. Was, I don't have John Williams' score, I don't have the sound effects, I don't have all those things that are so unbelievable. But what I do have is the ability to go into the characters' heads, into their backstories, etc. It was interesting. There was one thing in that movie that was really, really tricky. It's the scene where Rey is
seeing the reflections and things.
And we go into a voiceover. Yeah. And on screen, it's a visual storytelling. Yeah. Like, when we've all seen enough movies, we know when you go into a voiceover that you're jumping ahead in time. Right. And the narrator is reviewing something. And on screen, the visual shock there is she's being very vulnerable and telling the story, and then the screen shows us she's telling it to Kylo, to Ben Solo. Like, that's the surprise. But if you think about that, that's entirely visual. Yeah. And I was like, I got to that point and I was like, how do I do that in a novelization? Because I don't have that toolkit. How do I translate that scene? That was the most challenging part of that. And gosh, I walked around my house for like 2 or 3 days muttering, trying to figure out how to crack that one. But that's super fun. That was an amazing challenge to try to figure out.
Yeah, and I feel like, what you're saying about no sound effects and no music, I feel like if you're a fan of Star Wars, you hear the sound effects and music regardless of whether or not they're there. So I think, readers are able to fill that out in their minds.
Well, I love that you said that. That's one of my tests for myself, actually. Yeah. If I'm writing Star Wars and I get lost, the way I can tell myself that is, like, I can't hear the John Williams music. Yeah. And if that's where I need to think, why can't I hear that? And then kind of reset and get it right.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a good guiding light. That John Williams score is iconic for a reason.
Oh, yeah.
Switching gears a little bit, you recently made me cooler in the eyes of my son because we made a rare trip to the store the other day, and your book, Minecraft The Voyage, was on the shelf. And I said, hey, I'm going to be talking to the man who wrote that for the library. And he was just like, stop everything. What?
Awesome.
He was very impressed and very excited. He's in first grade and just loves Minecraft. So let's talk a little bit about that. What was it like writing in the Minecraft world?
Oh my goodness, it was such a treat. I was not hugely familiar with Minecraft, and kind of plunged in and thought I'll figure it out and still play Minecraft. Sometimes more than I should when I have things I need to be doing. But oh goodness, I just love it. And the one thing that was really fun about that story for me was I've never been a huge video gamer, but I played a lot at various points back in the day. And what I really loved about video games as a kid and as a young adult was when I could kind of sink into the story enough that my subconscious would kind of start making storylines out of it, even if there wasn't this big kind of program story you followed along. And that's what I just loved. And so in writing that book, the first thing I did was I just played for like 5-6 weeks. And that's absolutely what I was trying to do. I was trying to get to the point where my mind would start kind of spinning stories on its own, almost without me intervening, and start thinking of them. And I love that kind of freewheeling, unconscious storytelling engine, whatever it is. And so that's what I did. And in little bits and pieces, the idea of Stax's story and what would happen to him and what he would be doing kind of started to come to light to the point where I could engage with it as a book. But it was great. I'm a super night owl, and my wife would get up in the middle of the night, to go to the bathroom or whatever, and she'd kind of peer at me in my room, and she'd be like, what are you doing? Are you playing Minecraft again? And I'd be like, I'm working. And it was actually true.
Yeah.
So, that was a pretty awesome thing to get to try it out.
Now, was the openness of Minecraft, because I mean, in the traditional game, there's no real storyline. It's just so broad and open. Was it difficult to find like your entry point into that, or did you just sort of get in the groove of what was happening with the feel of the game and go from there?
No, it really wasn't. I knew the story came to me, and I was interested in the character I thought of, and I'd been rereading The Hobbit, which I love.
Oh, okay.
And I liked the idea. I liked the idea of a hero who's really not supposed to be the hero and really isn't cut out for this. And there's a little bit of The Hobbit in The Voyage. I also, from that book, I wanted to pay homage to that by using that sort of old time feel like you get in Victorian storytelling, where, each chapter begins with a little preview of what you're going to see. But it was a blast. I mean, it was a wonderful editor, Sarah Del Rey, but also working with the Minecraft folks. They were great. They helped me. We wanted to not violate the mechanics of the game in the book. But at the same time, they were really wonderful with helping me navigate where that got a little tricky, and how could I be true to that and also tell this story. It was so much fun.
Were you familiar with it at all, or did you start playing when you got the assignment?
No, I plunged in when I got the assignment.
Okay, so it was all right. So you're really learning on your feet there in the world of Minecraft. It's
amazing. I'm so all in now. I'm like I need to do the caves and cliffs snapshot and get amethyst.
Yeah, we certainly did some building. We've lately been playing the new Minecraft Dungeons, which is a little bit more. There's a bit more of a story. So they don't show any signs of stopping. That's big business.
No, and there's a Star Wars DLC now.
Yeah.
All things come together if you're patient.
Yeah, you're right. I want to talk a little bit about Jupiter Pirates. So this is you're up to 4 books in the series now, right?
I'm working on the story treatment for the 4th one right now.
All right.
Yeah.
So I read Hunt for Hydra, and I had a good time with it. I really appreciated the multi-generational approach that you're doing. Can you tell a little bit about the story and just, fill people in on that?
Sure. Jupiter Pirates is a story of they're a family of space pirates, though they're now technically privateers, which is kind of quasi-legal pirates.
Right.
It's set in the 29th century. Their home is Callisto, a planet that's a moon of Jupiter. And Earth is the bad guy in the series, and the Hashuns, that's the family, are privateers working for the Jovian Union, the outer moons of the solar system. And but the idea I had was I wanted a family of space pirates, and I had kind of the basics of the idea were there from the beginning. The mother was the captain, the father was the first mate, and the children were midshipmen, were crewmates together. But the engine of the book is that, that means they have to cooperate as a starship crew. They have to help keep each other alive on dangerous missions. But they're also competitors because the family starship gets handed down from one generation to the next. Yeah. And only one of the kids will be chosen to be the next captain.
And I really liked that element. I thought that added a level of stakes, that you might not otherwise have, because it does force that little bit of like you're saying, competition.
Yeah, and I think it's a dynamic that everyone knows, even if you don't have siblings. Like, that your brothers and sisters, you love them, but they sometimes drive you insane, and you're competing with them for things, but you're in this together. So yeah, that was just a really fun thing to explore. And then also, I've always loved pirate stuff, so you got to layer in, buried treasure and battles, and how it works between like the captain and the below decks crew, and all that good stuff. So yeah, it's been really satisfying going back to that series and figuring out the fourth book. And I'm almost done working my way through what the plot will be, and then hopefully sometime in the next few months get to dive into the writing of that.
Nice. Well, what I thought was fun about it is it definitely has that swashbuckling vibe like you're talking about. And I think, with the family, you see a little bit of like a Lost in Space vibe that pops in every once in a while, a little bit of Star Trek mixed in. But what I think it succeeds at is really carving out its own unique niche. I don't really think it fits in any one category. It's just sort of wholly its own thing. And I would think that would be hard to do at this point.
Yeah, it's I'll tell a funny story about, how that book has been presented. Another big influence, I love the Patrick O'Brian books, the Aubrey Maturin series. Yeah. Love those books. In fact, my wife and I were just watching Master and Commander, the wonderful movie of that last night. I love those books, and so those were a big influence. But the other thing I'd been watching back when I thought of Jupiter Pirates was The Sopranos.
Okay.
And I watched The Sopranos like 3 years after it was done. And so I was like full of Sopranos talk that I wanted to share with people. And everybody else was like, we watched that like a long time ago. Like, what are you doing?
That train has left the station 3 years later.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't have anybody to talk Sopranos with. And so the funny thing was that kind of came out in Jupiter Pirates. Like, it doesn't have bad words, and it's thankfully not nearly as violent, but it's sort of the same thing. A family trying to navigate what they've been and what they're becoming, and how to get from the one to the other is really tough. So when HarperCollins brought the books out, they billed them as Battlestar Galactica meets Treasure Island. And I was like, that's absolutely right. But what they really are is Patrick O'Brian meets The Sopranos. But I was like,
I could see why they didn't think that would sell as well.
Yeah, the way you said it makes a lot more sense. So let's do that.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, now that you say that, I can see what you mean. But I don't think I would have thought, what this reminds me of? The HBO series, The Sopranos.
Not the way to bring them to kids.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this and you have kids, it's fine. It's not like having them watch The Sopranos unsupervised, I promise.
What age would you say that's aimed towards? Like, is it like the 8 to 12 range, or would you say like teens?
I think it's one of those series where, I mean, as you know so well, also every kid is different.
Yes.
I think / it's one of those series you can start on it at 8 to 12, but I think the books, not in terms of language, but in terms of all the issues and plots that get thrown in the mix, I think the books get more complicated as they go along. So I think it's a series that you can age with. And I like to say they work 8 to 80, and I hope that's true.
Yeah. Well, my son, like I said, is first grade. He's 6, and we read quite a bit of it. I read it out loud. We read it together, and the swashbuckling aspects of it, that adventure he was really into, and once you get into the more deeper dynamics, like he wasn't picking up on that stuff, but I was. Yeah. So like it worked nicely for both of us.
Oh, that's great.
So you're working on book 4 now, and what else do you have? Is there anything else you can tease us with as far as upcoming projects?
Yeah, I always had to think, this is the life of being a Star Wars writer. You always have to think, what am I working on? What's been announced?
Right.
And not get yourself in trouble.
Yeah. Say just enough to not tick off Mickey Mouse is what you have to do.
Exactly. A really fun thing I know has been announced. I have almost done with revisiting a book that's really dear to my heart, the Clone Wars character encyclopedia.
Okay, sure.
We've done a completely new reimagining of that for DK. Mm-hmm. That has been so much fun. We wrote the original one, I think, 3 seasons in.
Okay.
And this is reimagined for the entire show with mm-hmm. many more characters and a whole lot more to cover. And it's been so much fun going back to that book for a couple reasons. And one of them is that was the book that when I would go to bookstores or to conventions, like people would come up to me with just battered copies of it falling apart.
Yes.
And I'd always apologize for the condition of this book. And I'd be like, oh goodness, please don't apologize for that. That means this book has been well loved.
Yeah.
And that's, the nicest compliment an author can get. But a couple of times parents told me, like, my son or daughter didn't really like to read, until she picked up this book. And now she reads everything.
Yeah.
And that was that last part was what I really loved to hear. Books were so important to me as a kid mm-hmm. and, made such a difference in my life that to get to think that something I wrote has helped somebody else along that road, that was really humbling and really gratifying and just so nice to hear. It reminded me of why we do this.
That's the thing. I mean, gateways are so important to get a kid interested in reading. I think you're absolutely right with these DK style books. It could be graphic novels, it can be novelizations like it was for me. But in our experience at the library, the interest in those type of books, the DK books like your Clone Wars Encyclopedia, the interest far outlasts the strength of the binding. So the copies on our shelves really are. It's just like, take this with a rubber band, until the new copy comes in, because kids just devour them. Kids and adults. They're the perfect coffee table book, or the perfect thing to just like sit in your bedroom with a flashlight when you're a kid, looking at, oh, so that's what that thing is. So yeah, I think they're great.
Yeah, no, I love that. With your permission, I might steal that line. Like,
yes.
Yeah, the interest outlasts the strength of the binding.
Yeah,
that's
please.
It exactly. Thank you.
Do you have something? So you have a pretty vast collection of work here, and I'm always curious what, as an author, you would like someone's introduction to your work to be. Is there one that kind of comes back into your head, or you'd think, start here?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There are a couple of entry points. I think the best book I've ever written, by which I mean the book that made it into the world closest to the kind of perfect book I had in my mind that you never quite get to write, that would be Curse of the Iris, the second Jupiter Pirates book.
Okay.
Which I think, I really like Hunt for the Hydra, the first book, but I was still kind of feeling my way into the story and the world. Mm-hmm. But Curse of the Iris, I really had, I had all that down, and I think it really works. Okay. And interestingly, I think if you're a newcomer to that series, I think you can dive right in with Curse of the Iris.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, and that one, a series I really love for Star Wars, I wrote a 4-book series for Disney Lucasfilm Press called Servants of the Empire, which is tied into Rebels. And that was an enormous amount of fun. It includes events from a couple of episodes of the show,
okay,
but it's really its own story about Zer Leonis, who's an Imperial cadet who Ezra Bridger runs into. And I got to explore a lot of really interesting things there and tell a really fun story with characters I fell in love with. So
yeah.
And that one, like others, is 8 to 12. I think it works if you're 18 or 58 or whatever as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would, if you're a newcomer, I'd try those. Or I'm also very proud of that Minecraft book.
Yeah. Okay.
That's hopefully a something that you can curl up with and be entertained for a few hours.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, hey, Jason, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed the chat.
Yeah, no, thank you. This has been wonderful. I really appreciate your time.
All right, thanks. My thanks again to author Jason Fry. I really enjoyed the conversation, and now I realize I need to check out that Star Wars Rebels series. Rebels is a show that I feel like got stuck in the shadow of Clone Wars, even though it's great. It's probably my favorite of the Star Wars series that's out there, so I definitely want to check that out. If you haven't read any of Jason Fry's works, we've got tons of them here at the David A. Howe Public Library, and there's also some available digitally through Libby, so I hope you'll check them out there. Also, keep an eye out for his new updated Clone Wars Encyclopedia that's coming out. We'll certainly have that, probably a few copies. And also keep an eye out for the 4th book in the Jupiter Pilot series, which is currently in process. Until then, you can find Jason online at jupiterpirates.com, follow him on Twitter at JasonCFry, or visit his website, Jason Fry's Dorkery, at jasonfry.tumblr.com. We'll see you next time here on How's Things.